Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back for our next service. So today we, again, have the opportunity to be at the beautiful Scyport second floor, where we have a great view of some science and engineering behind us with the train bridge. We also had a great opportunity today to help them do a little bit more volunteer work and help them paint their sign, which looks very sharp now. So if you come out to Scyport and see the red sign, know that that was a contribution of your local Being Human church. So today's topic is brought to you by a discussion that I heard earlier this week. And the discussion revolved around things that people were concerned about. One of those things was the migrant caravan coming up from Guatemala. And there was some serious concern about terrorism and drug gangs and those sorts of things, which is understandable, right? We all want public safety and stability. But that got me to thinking, what is it that we should really be concerned about? What things should we be focused on in our lives to get after our mission for humanity to survive and thrive? What things should we be focused on in the long term that are going to prevent major catastrophes? And so I thought, what are the catastrophes that are threatening humanity? What are the long-term threats to our existence? What you would call existential threats. And I came up with four, and so I named them the new Four Horsemen. And they actually track pretty well with the old Four Horsemen, but I wanted to be a little bit specific on it. So before we get into those four things, I just want to ask a question. What things are we focused on today that maybe are a little bit too short-term? So immigration, economy, politics, entertainment, right? We often ask people, have you seen the new show of X, Y, or Z? And so there are things that we have to have time to, really think about in terms of just the topical fun things. Your brain has to have a rest every once in a while. There's a work-rest cycle for your brain. We talked about decision fatigue a little bit in the past. You get tired of making choices and hard decisions, so we've got to take that time to rest and recuperate. But I kind of think we should be providing for our future by investing in the things that are really threatening us. So one of those things is just investing in our children so that then they are more capable of solving problems as they arise, and trying to plan for research and education for the future so that we're able to get after these threats that are coming, that may be in our future. And so I want to bring up this concept of finite and infinite games. We've talked about it a little bit in a couple of different services, but finite games are about winning the quarter or winning the election or winning the promotion. It's a very discrete and time-constrained thing. And those kind of games, finite games, are zero-sum, meaning that someone wins, someone loses. But when we're talking about the survival of humanity or providing for our children, that's an infinite game. That's a game where the point of the game is to keep playing the game, to keep humanity going. So the infinite game really is that humans thrive and live in abundance and are protected from extinction threats. And the infinite kind of games are win-win games. They're games where when people win and they play, we continue to grow and expand the game. Because if the infinite game is over, all human meaning that's been built up to this point is gone. All the political wins and losses, all of the history, everything is gone. There's nothing to carry that on. Maybe some alien, race in the future will find it and excavate our fossils, but everything that we know and love is gone. And that's the game you don't want to lose. You can lose every finite game, but as long as you win the infinite game, that's what matters. So to do that, we have to maximize our optionality. And the way I like to think about this is when you are looking at life as a path, right? There are many different paths and choices and branches that we could take throughout life that would lead to different outcomes. So as humanity, we have the same thing. So we're moving forward as humanity. And down any one of those paths could be certain doom, if you want to quote the Labyrinth. Which of those paths have certain doom? And if we have off-ramps from certain doom, Those are our options. That's our optionality. So what we want to do is take the paths that we think are going to steer us away, as far away from our existential threats. So let's talk about those 4 threats, and then we'll kind of try and illustrate how we would off-ramp from those. How do we create options to steer away from threats? So the first threat of the 4 is disease. So, or pestilence, if you want to go to back to the Four Horsemen. So diseases could be human-created or natural. It could be a supervirus. It could be an antibacterial or a antibiotic-resistant bug. But the way that our world is interconnected today, the threat of such a virus is extremely high because it could spread much more quickly than we are able to contain it. I know Bill Gates, the previous owner of Microsoft, has been very interested in pandemic research because of the level of threat. I would actually say this is probably the highest threat to human existence today in terms of probability and likelihood. Or, I'm sorry, likelihood and severity of the threat. If you go back to 1918, the Spanish flu killed 50 to 100 million people, which is more than all of the wars in human history combined, the last I checked. 100 million people died, or up to 100 million people died, just from the flu. So get your flu shot, it's important. But there are other things today that could threaten us. And there are not good sensing mechanisms in place. And a lot of good research, there is some research happening in vaccines and different things, but we've noticed that there's a resistance to vaccines and a resistance to treating and preventing the types of things that are going to harm us in terms of all human existence. So additionally, our misuse of antibiotics is creating more and more antibiotic-resistant drugs or bacteria. So for instance, tuberculosis is becoming more and more antibiotic resistant. And once you catch it, a lot of times for those strains, it's very difficult for them to treat. They only have 1 or 2 kinds of antibiotics left. And so, one of the things we can do is stop misusing antibiotics and stop asking for antibiotics when you don't need it. Most of the time, you're going to be just fine if you sleep it off and eat some soup and drink some water. But we need to be smarter about that. We need to be doing more research. We need to be preserving species so that we have the ability to find new kinds of antibiotics. So that's disease. The next one is war, and particularly nuclear war. So war is always going to be a threat, but realistically, war is kind of a localized threat. Unless the war kicks off, some famine or whatever else, nuclear war is really the thing that's a threat to human existence. It would be pretty easy for us to wipe out all of humanity with nuclear war. And definitely in today's world, rhetoric is extremely high, where we don't have a common sense of human purpose, right? It seems like everyone's thinking about the finite game. How do we win X resources, or how do we influence country X to do our bidding? And so that's definitely concerning. I know I'm concerned about that. I don't see this as this is going to happen tomorrow sort of thing, but it's something that we need to be working to off-ramp from. And I think one of the key points in here that we have to remember when it comes to war and conflict and international relations is that we are more the same than we are different. In my time spent in 20 plus countries around the world, people generally want the same things. They want stability, they want prosperity, they want a better life for their kids. That's basically it. There are different views of what that looks like, but those are the things that are common amongst all the countries that I've seen in the world. So the next threat is climate. And we talked about climate previously, what that entails. But some issues specifically that climate drives are famine, which could come from food chain collapse or biodiversity collapse. Right now, there's a great concern among ornithologists that we're rapidly losing insects in different places around the world. They're dying off, and they're not quite sure why. They think it's related to climate, but they're not entirely sure. Other issues with climate are crop disease, right? So conditions change for crop diseases to spread more rapidly. And we also have, in terms of climate in general and how we're managing our use of our climate resources, we have a lot of mega crops. We have a lot of places that export one crop, and that of course makes it extremely vulnerable to a particular disease. So you've seen like coffee rust for coffee, of course, and other fungi that are attacking bananas in different places. Bananas are basically all the same strain now because they're the most productive. And so without that sort of variety, we're at great risk for our food chain to decay or fall apart completely. So there's, of course, acidification of the oceans. So there's a lot of research that shows that a lot of the way our biosphere operates is due to the way the ocean interacts with being able to store carbon dioxide and to recycle things. And a lot of the food chain starts there. And so as the ocean gets more acidic, that then prevents it from sustaining life. And again, that part of the food chain could fall apart. So it's not just about temperature and about weather, but also about the conditions that are brought about by changing climate. And of course, as we've talked about before, it doesn't really matter who's changing climate or why. I think it's pretty clear that it's human caused based from the research that I've seen. But even if it weren't, even if it were entirely caused by gradual changes in the climate, if it's eventually going to lead us to extinction, we still need to figure out how to adjust our climate to make it conducive for us. We have that ability if we invest the time and the research into it, into understanding how we do that without making everything fall apart due to our actions. And then finally, there's space. In the short term, likely the lowest of the threats, an asteroid colliding with Earth or another, celestial body colliding with Earth. But it's something that's real. So let's say, and there are some theories in terms of how the dinosaurs became extinct, that an asteroid collided with Earth and caused conditions or maybe exacerbated conditions that were causing the dinosaurs' decline. And one of those theories is that the Oort cloud of comets may align with Earth's path every 26 million years. Now, that's not something we should particularly worry about right now, but let's say that we do actually cross paths with celestial bodies every so often. By however long we have left until that 26 million year point, we need to figure out how to either protect this planet or be on more than one planet so that we're not wiped out if we run into it again. That's a long time from now, but there's a lot of thought that needs to go behind how we would make that happen. How would we either protect the Earth with, being able to shoot them down or prevent them from colliding? We don't know what those things are. But we should be able to figure it out by 26 million years from now. But we won't if we're focused on the short term all of the time between now and then. And then thinking about space and threats from off of this planet, I think help us to realize that we're all in this together. Imagine, you see in the movies, of course, giant asteroid headed to Earth, and all of a sudden all the countries of the world are joined at the hip, and we're putting all of our resources together to figure out how to save Earth. I don't think we should be doing that now. But instead, small-minded people are worried about, winning their particular race, or, that their country has influence over others to regain their former glory. There is no former or future glory if there are no humans. So to me, it's really important that we are focused on these long-term things and to lift our eyes up from the day-to-day and look to those threats so that we can step out of the way and avoid them. But if we never look up, we can never get out of those paths. So what does that do? It doesn't mean that we worry every day about asteroids colliding with Earth or being wiped out by a pandemic or zombie plague or whatever it is, but we do need to balance our daily thoughts with our long-term thoughts. We need to have that time for reflection and looking forward and figuring out, what is it I can do today to advance this mission? So let's say, we're talking about climate change, right? So we mentioned this, I think, a few weeks ago when we talked about climate, but Let's say right now we're headed for a path where the Earth is going to be too hot to sustain the type of human life that we've become comfortable and accustomed to. If that's something that's a priority for us that we want to sustain, then we need to figure out how to get off this path. And some people might say, well, we're never going to make the 1.5 degree or even the 2 degree mark by whatever the date is that we set. Well, that doesn't mean that we should give up. That just means that we need to figure out, can we still off-ramp in time? I think the answer is always yes. It just depends on how drastic an action we take. So let's say our path takes us this way. And over here is the Earth is too hot. And maybe where we actually want to be is we want to be more like over here. But maybe we can't quite make that turn. Maybe we're going too fast right now. We got to figure out an alternative. Maybe between here and here, there's still an alternative that causes us to miss being too hot. But it's going to take us now more energy and resources to mitigate that ending that we get to, or that path, I should say. Same thing with space. So say we're going in this direction, and over here, eventually, in 26 million years, the Earth gets completely annihilated. So if we keep heading in that direction, we take no other turns, we never make it off the planet, we do nothing to protect it, we all die. And what we do today doesn't really matter because we never made the turn. But if instead we can make the turn just slightly, and we can deflect, whatever it is running into the planet, then we save most everybody, then humankind continues to survive. Or if we make an even earlier turn, a more drastic turn, we make it off this planet, we start to colonize other planets. Then we've got redundancy, probably one of the best options. Because of course that branch then leads to more branches. Let's say Earth does get demolished, but we're also on Mars and Venus. Well, fantastic. But what if in the collision with Earth it creates basically space debris that then clutters up all the other planetary orbits? Well, then it's even better if not only are we off of this planet onto other ones, but we're in other solar systems. More redundancy, more optionality. So we end up with these branches, all of which contain humanity's continued existence. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for the best middle ground that gives us the most options to continue human existence. Because as we're going down these paths and we're choosing different turns, we want to steer around the threats as they come up. Whether it's pandemics, space, war. All right, going back to war, one of the key things in war is that we have this concept that there are finite resources, that there is not enough, and I want to make sure my team has what we need or has more than the other team. But if you think about it today, most of the resources we have are plenty abundant. We have infinite energy, at least in the relatively long term, in terms of the sun, if we learn how to harness it and distribute it appropriately. We can already feed all of humans on Earth if we just learn how to produce and distribute food more efficiently. And so you got food, you got energy, which is basically just two kinds of energy. So with those two things, we can do anything we need to with the appropriate amount of time. So energy and time are the things you really need. And both of those, as far as we know, are currently abundant as long as we're able to focus our efforts in using our time wisely. But we need to think about what that looks like. What does societal structure look like? What does it mean to live with abundance? We'll talk about that in another service. We need to realize that we have those abilities if we lift our head up from our daily grind. So the next thing is to advocate for community working together, and that's particularly to prevent war. But that's why we're here. We might not all exactly agree with each other on the best path forward, but if we can all generally agree that we want humanity to continue and we want the world to be better than it is today, well, then we're all headed in the right direction. And we can argue about specifics later. But, to the Russians, I would say we're all on the same planet. We're all in the same rocket flying through space right now. And to the Chinese and the North Koreans and the Iranians, right? We're all on the same planet. And if we're all aiming for continued human existence, let's figure out how to do that together. We can let our ideas compete. We can compete our ideas to see which works best. That's diversity. That's testing. It's like A/B testing. Which one of these is working better right now? But if we're trying to interfere in each other's finite games, and it's messing up the infinite game, that's probably not the best path. And then we need to advocate to invest in research, in education, in science, and advocate to our representatives to do the same. Because those are the things that are actually going to prevent the other three threats of climate, space, and disease. Because those are things that require what you would call a long tail. There's a lot of things that go into having the right solution in time to prevent those threats. So that's why I'm glad we're here today at SciPort. We're hoping that investing here with our time and energy helps this organization continue and inspiring kids to learn about and invest in science and engineering and research. Because those are the things that are going to save us in the long term. So we need to have a common sense of community and purpose, and then invest in the things that are going to save us in the future. So that's all I have for today. I hope that provides a little bit of reflective topic for you for this weekend and this week. And so I'd like to close with, as always, our what we're grateful for. So if you all have anything that you're grateful for, feel free to share. This week, I was particularly grateful that I got a little bit extra time with my family yesterday. I didn't think I was going to have. I thought I was going to have to work. But we went downtown to the Asiana Festival, which was very cool downtown. Great food, great dancing. And it's amazing to see how much culture we actually have. So of course we're in Louisiana in the South, and people I don't think would normally associate this region with a diverse culture. But it's not true. Pretty much any place you're going to land in any place in the world is going to have some cultural diversity. You just have to find it and go and appreciate it. And so I'm really grateful to have found that. In the coming week, I'm grateful for getting ready for some work activities that we have going on, and that I have a really great team that I'm looking forward to working with and having them learn about a little bit more about what we do at work. So that's what I'm grateful for and looking forward to for this week. Anyone have anything they'd like to share for this week?
Well, I'm grateful for all the things we do. Like last Friday was a good time. We had a game night. Then coming up, we've got comedy on Tuesday. And we've got Friday is a magic show that some of us are going to. Looking forward to that. Kind of thing. So life is good.
Yep, life is good. Yeah, so we did have a good fun game night at our house on Friday, so that was awesome as always. And there, Eric was saying that we have quite a few events coming up. You said comedy show and a magic show, right? Right. R-rated magic show.
Yeah, so it's on the website.
That should be fun. So, anyone else? All right.
Forward to the week, doing Swim for Life again, teaching second graders how not to drown, swim safety, and teaching tennis again.
Okay, awesome.
Summer grade teaching third and fourth graders how to play tennis. I'm grateful for both of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the having community and having those activities, especially now that we've got a fairly good group together, is such a relief, I think, because whenever we have community, we have a place where we can be ourselves and just relax a little bit, which is nice. It would be great if we could do that more in society, and hopefully our continued engagement and conversation will eventually make that a reality. But then also, so like you said, Steve was saying teaching Swim for Life, which is a water safety course. That's investment, right? We don't know which of those kids are going to be saved by that course, who then may go on to make some contribution in the world. So the mind is the most powerful thing we have, and preserving those and providing for their learning and diversity is kind of the primary mission of those who have already gone through our formative years. So I think that's a great thing to look forward to. So, well, thank you all for coming this week. I appreciate you all coming out, and we'll see you again next week.